Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Tyson Heaton.
Thank you. Everybody hear me all right? Let's see if this works. It was working. Oh, look at that. So we're just going to start off with an activity, and then we'll jump into the meat of things. Does anyone recognize this thing? Oh, we got a few that recognizes it. Thanks, Ken. This is this articulates some of the principles in the Shingo model. So if you look at this, you'll see the cultural enablers down here: lead with humility, respect for every individual, and then some of the continuous improvement principles, enterprise alignment, and results. So what I want to do is, if you have your own business mission, values, and systems, like, you can substitute some of those values for these principles if you're not real familiar with the principles. Does that make sense? In this activity I'm going to ask you to do. But I'm going to kind of read through these principles and give you my current definition of them, kind of how I look at them and think of them. And I want you to think about the people you work with, other leaders or other team members, and I want you to think, okay, is there anyone in my workplace that I've seen lately exhibit that principle or some of those behaviors, right? Can I connect that with someone at my work or an action that I've seen over the past week or month? And once you get that in your head, think of that story, and then we're going to pause a little, and you can tell your neighbor sitting next to you the story or the actions that you saw that connect and align with the principles, right? So does that make sense how you could use, like, if you have a set of business values and one of them is like integrity or trust or results, right? You could substitute those. I like the Shingo model. At OC Tanner, we use the Shingo model. The Shingo model it's not on trial. It's a fantastic model. When I think of the Shingo model, I think of, does anyone watch South Park ever? You ever seen the Super Best Friends Club that gets together with, like, Jesus and Muhammad and Gandhi? Yeah. That's what I think of as the Shingo model. You kind of took the best thinking of operational excellence and some of the greatest thinkers and experimenters in operational excellence, like Covey, Peter Senge in the Fifth Discipline, Deming, Taishi Ono, the Toyota production system, and they tried to carve it and pack it all together in a model. So if you're struggling with one of the principles, dig a little deeper and dive into some of the authors behind the principles, and you'll discover maybe a little more there. So I'm going to read through. You be thinking about people in your organization. I'm going to start with cultural enablers. So respect every individual. People in your organization who you may have seen demonstrate significant respect or care, concern for another individual. A person who listens and genuinely hears the opinions of others. Lead with humility. People who can take risks and lead out, but when someone says, hey, wait a minute, there's another way we could do this, they can stop and listen, right? Or people who put the good of the group or the organization ahead of their own personal ego and agenda, right? Someone who took an action that may have hurt their department slightly but helped the organization. On the continuous improvement section, flow and pull value, you may have seen people who, when they get in a team, they can just make flow happen. They can set up the Kanbans, and the team seems to flow smoother when they jump in, and who helps work through a pull system. Quality at the source, someone who's not afraid to raise their hand when they see an error, to ask questions and dig in. Or someone who takes the time to teach people what quality is so they're empowered to do that. Focus on process. This is somebody who asks, doesn't ask the 5 who's, who did it, right? They ask, why, what happened? Help me understand. They go to the Gemba, they dig in. Embrace scientific thinking. We got a guy at OC Tanner, Ray Peterson. He's like the data king. That's who I think of. And there's others, right? Somebody who's always bringing data and who's asking, can you support that evidence can you support that claim with evidence? Or who brings the evidence when they make a proposal. Seek perfection. These are those who are like, we're doing great, but I think we can do better, right? Enterprise alignment. This could be someone in your organization that continually reminds you what the purpose of your organization is. The things that are more important than profit, right? The things that that you're willing to sacrifice some temporary gain for in order to push your company forward. Think systemically. This is somebody who can look up and down the value stream when they make a change and ask questions from suppliers and customers before they roll something out to understand its impacts. People who think about the community and political impact of what they do. Create value for the customer. You've seen people like this, driving for results. Ones who have the customer in mind and focus on it. Did people come to mind when I was talking about them? Okay. Share it with your neighbor. Tell your neighbor a story about someone you saw in your organization who did one of these things. 1, 2, 3, go. If you're a lone island, scoot closer to someone. Okay, now switch and let the other person share and tell a story. If you haven't yet. Okay, so it's okay if you keep talking, but I'm going to give you one more piece of instruction to this exercise. Obviously, you're talking, so you have someone in mind, or you know someone who's doing these things. I want you to take out your phone, and I want you to text or email that person and say, hey, I just wanted to say that I was thinking about you and this thing you did, and I thought it was really good because it helped our organization, blah, 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 connected to the principles, whatever, right? I want you to take out your phone and send the email or send the text message. It's okay. It's all right. If you send multiple emails or text messages to the same person, I don't think they'll be irritated. Anybody send a text message or email yet? If you send one, raise your hand. If you really can't think of anybody, just maybe send a note to your wife or your husband or kids and tell them you love them. Did anybody send anything yet? You did?
Yeah.
What did you send?
Good job.
Good job what?
To him.
For doing what?
I don't know. I didn't.
Oh, you missed the first of it. You guys were out at the food truck still, huh?
I did send mine. I actually sent it to him.
Yeah.
This is, dude, I really like what you did with the Kaizen event at FCC. You really helped the organization. Mark, Matt.
That's awesome. Cool.
Before we close.
You were spot on. He needs a little work, but good job. Okay, so I'm hoping that as you go through this exercise, does this feel good? Is it okay? Feel all right? Okay, that's all I'm really going to talk about today. Like we could end here, and if you remembered that and you just started practicing that more consistently in the organization, I can be fairly positive that you're going to see your results grow. But I want to dig into this process, why it works, how it happens, all these things. So this process is a type of what I'm going to continue to talk about. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about, if the clicker works. Oh, I got to point it at the computer. So there's a number of us from OC Tanner here, but what we do is global rewards and recognition. So we have offices all over the world, and we have a pick, pack, ship operation that ships a number of awards, and then a custom manufacturing side that actually produces trophies and emblems and great stuff. We ship about 14,000 a day, and people are like, whoa, that's a lot of awards. So a little bit more about OC Tanner, and then I'm going to jump into the material. This clicker is... We really believe this. If you come to OC Tanner and you work there long enough, you either end up believing these kind of statements or you feel like the only normal person on the Truman Show. You seen the Truman Show? Yeah. So we believe that we help the world accomplish and appreciate great work, and we really believe that recognition elevates everything. A lot of times when we talk about culture and cultural change, you'll hear the recognition slip into the slides, and as a additional thing to maybe do and consider, at OC Tanner, we believe it's the core of engagement, of moving an organization and culture forward. And I want to talk a little bit more about kind of some of the things I've discovered in working for OC Tanner, because I didn't really believe this always, okay? I know, heresy, don't report back at headquarters. So culture, who's getting sick of this word? Anybody? Like, does anybody think that we're overusing this word, culture? That it means everything all the time? I've gotten a little irritated because I'm not sure what people say when they mean when they say culture, and it could mean anything. So I want to first lay out some definition of when I say culture, what I mean, and what type of culture I'm really interested in. And one of the things I've noticed is that certain organizations have what I call stickiness, and the majority of organizations have what I call amnesia. They have a hard time with turning short-term learnings into long-term values or systems. So as I moved from organization to organization in different companies, I'd start lean or continuous improvement, and I'd start driving it, and then I'd go dig into the closet and look for books and stuff, and I'd always find that, holy crap, they were doing the same thing 5 years ago. Somebody else was trying to do the same exact thing that I'm trying to do today 5 years ago, and it's been consistent. So, when I joined OC Tanner, I wondered, what makes OC Tanner sticky? Like, they don't have to keep relearning the same things over and over. What's different about this group than others? And so when I say culture, I'm specifically talking about a culture that's healthy, that's engaged, that is a learning organization, and is bonded and connected. And we're going to go into a little bit more depth of what those definitions are and lace them out. So just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to kind of go through, we're going to define a desirable culture fit for the challenges of the 21st century, and these words I mentioned early: engaged, healthy, bonded, and learning organization. What does it look like? And we're gonna go into like the cadaver. Like, if I was to split open the body of a person in a healthy, engaged culture, what would I see? What would their brain look like? What would their guts look like? Right, in keeping with Halloween. And then this other question of how do we set the environment for great culture that meets this definition, and how do we intentionally indoctrinate and influence culture? Okay? How do you craft culture? And who can we look to for cues? Okay, so a great culture would be an engaged culture. This is another word that's thrown around a lot. So I'm using Gallup's definition of engaged, okay? And as I read these definitions of engagement, maybe in your head think, where do my people fall? What percent of my people meet engaged definition? What percent of my people meet not engaged definition? And what percent of my people meet actively disengaged? So Gallup would say that engaged is employees come to work with passion and feel a profound connection to their company. They drive innovation and move their organization forward. Okay? You get these off Gallup's site. Gallup's got a little cool research on this. Not engaged are employees are essentially checked out. They're sleepwalking through their workday, putting time but not energy or passion into their work. Right? They punch in, they punch out, they're in and out. They tolerate work, but they're there. Actively disengaged are employees aren't just unhappy at work, they're busy acting out their unhappiness. Every day these workers undermine what their engaged coworkers accomplish. Okay? Kind of have some percentages in your head, or you kind of like think of people and maybe, oh, you're this category, that category. Okay. So let's, oh, my clicker's working. Nope, it's not. Good. Do I? Okay. So if you want engagement, we get this question a lot at OC Tanner. People will come in for a tour. During the Q&A, someone will inevitably raise their hand and they'll ask, hey, what's your burning platform right now for lean? Okay? And we go through this process of, well, we had a burning platform, but we don't really, I don't know, there's some business needs and some urgency, but when we first started our lean journey, we did engage in a burning platform, but it doesn't propel or sustain us now. And so the question here is, can you get engagement with a burning platform? Right? You light the fire under the people. Hopefully the burning platform comes from outside the company rather than inside the company, right? Because if you're a leader and you light the burning platform, what does that make you? There's a word for it. An arsonist? Yeah, okay. When you're an arsonist, it makes it harder for people to connect to you and feel a genuine sense of belonging to the organization. But this is essentially what a lot of corporate America is doing. They're creating artificial burning platforms. Our shareholders must have these results. So they light the fire. And the people know and recognize that it comes from within their organization. And there's a fear that if we don't have a burning platform and we're not scaring people into improving or doing what's important and necessary, they'll go to the safe and secure place and they'll just relax. They'll coast. And we won't see any more improvement, okay? And then right now what's happening, seems like to me, is companies are saying, we want to go from burning platform straight to innovating, fully engaged workforce. And if we just put in all these tools and make it happen, boom, okay? And kind of my thesis is that it doesn't work that way, that there's stages that you have to move an organization through, and they connect with the human and the way we're wired and what we do, and we'll go into that. So, a little bit about the brain. Then we're gonna talk about a little story, and then we're gonna go back to the brain. But here's the reason why burning platform won't work as a long-term strategy. Can't work. Your best people will leave first. Okay? After the first burning platform, your best people will start to leave. Because they'll say, if this isn't a safe and secure place for me to have a job, the ones who have the ability to leave will leave. Okay? The other reason is it's disastrous on health. When you're stuck in a situation where you fear for your job every day, or you fear for the future of the company, your brain will secrete the brainstem part will secrete cortisol, and you raise the stress level of all the employees in your organization. And when that happens, what happens is it shuts off your prefrontal cortex, and it shuts off some other parts of your brain, and you're wired to take action. And you're most likely to take the action that's either most popular or most consistent with the past. You won't do new stuff in a fear and insecurity state, right? So it also shuts off a lot of your immune systems. It primes you for action. So long-term stress literally kills people. They'll gain weight. Their body stops absorbing nutrients because blood's diverted from your intestines and your stomach to be routed for and primed for fight or flight. Okay, so it's not a healthy long-term sustainable plan for moving people forward. It can be used occasionally, but you're best if you don't have to use it. So I want to tell you a little story about how, well, this is my wife. And so I met her in Logan, and Saturday is our 11-year anniversary. And we were married over here on the alumni house, at the alumni house on campus, 11 years ago, October 15th. And she's great. She's a much better person than I am. which I'm pretty good at picking a team, I think. So we got married. She worked. We got through school. I took a job working for JBS, and then we moved out to Pennsylvania. And I was the continuous improvement lean guy, and all day work, I'd go and I'd look for problems and I'd find problems, and then we'd work on solving them. And then I'd come home and I'd point out problems at home and things that I wanted to work on, and I'd complain about the problems at work. And I was very engaged in solving problems and talking about problems and fixing problems. And I was working probably 65, 70 hours a week. And she came to me after we'd been out there a couple of years, and she said, I can't do it anymore. Like, it's not working. And I thought everything was great. I thought everything was fine. I was like, we have a great relationship. You listen to me complain, and I seem to be getting better. But I didn't realize that all that was kind of slamming them down. And so I got scared. I got worried. My brain was like, all the neural pathways are readjusting to this new information. And I started looking into the different, I looked at counselors to see, do they actually get results if you go to a counselor? And all the counselors, when you go look to see if they, I'm a data guy, so I was like, which counselors actually have a better success rate? And there's this line on all their stats that they say is like, it really depends on the level of engagement that a couple has when they come to counseling. And I was like, I've used that line. As a lean guy, I've told people that, well, if we have the right leadership support and you guys just need to follow my plan. Oh, this is going places. So I'd used that line before. I knew what that line meant. It meant I don't have confidence in my plan and what's going on to be able to give you a real stat. So I was afraid of shrinks and stuff. I'm not as afraid of them as I now know a couple of them, coincidentally. But I discovered this guy's work called John Gottman, and he had this method where he could watch a couple for 15 minutes, and then he would be able to predict with a 90% accuracy rate whether or not they'd stay married in 5 years. So 15 minutes of observation gave him confidence that he could predict whether or not some couple would be married. And he was right. Almost 95% of the time. Fascinating, right? So I was like, what's he doing? What's he watching? And so I'm going to show you this little clip. And we'll talk about it a little.
We start by talking about what it is we learned that allows us to predict divorce or stability with very high accuracy. The first thing we found was that if you take a look at the ratio of positive stuff during conflict, things like interest, asking questions, being nice to one another, being kind, being affectionate, being empathetic, and you look at all the negative stuff like criticism, hostility, anger, hurt feelings, and you take the ratio of positive to negative. In relationships that stay together, that ratio turns out to be 5 to 1. There's 5 times as many positive things going on in relationships that work as negative. So that's an interesting equation. And it sort of suggests that if you do something negative to hurt your partner's feelings, that you have to make up for it with 5 positive things. So the equation is not balanced in terms of positive and negative. Negative has a lot more ability to inflict pain and damage than positive things have to heal and bring you closer. Now, the couples who wound up divorced, that ratio was 0.8 to 1. So there was a little more negativity than positivity in couples who were heading for divorce.
Okay, we're not going to watch the second video, although it's great. This guy's smart. But fascinating. I was like, holy crap, some data behind some psychology. What? So I was like, I just got to be more positive than I am negative, which was kind of a challenge at the time. It wasn't just that. There were other things that I've been working on too. But that was a fascinating revelation to me. And I've since kind of dug in and tried to understand it a little better. And a while ago, somebody sent me an article from HBR where it talks about like why this is the case, right? They say things like humans are wired to see problems, but what in the neurochemistry of our bodies is making this 5-to-1 ratio happening? But there's these two chemicals. Oxytocin is one of them, and the other one's cortisol. And cortisol is blamed as the stress hormone, and oxytocin is kind of this bonding hormone. And this article from HBR said, positive comments and conversations produce a chemical reaction too. They spur the production of oxytocin, a feel-good hormone that elevates our ability to communicate, collaborate, and trust others by activating networks in our prefrontal cortex. But oxytocin metabolizes more quickly than cortisol, so its effects are less dramatic and long-lasting. I saw this. I did not trust HBR, so I called one of my cousins who he's a professor down at Price, and he studied neurochemistry in the brain. And I was like, show me some data. And he did. So I validated it. It's true. Cortisol hangs out in your system longer. So it's not that you're ruminating on fear or that it's your mind that drums up the process again. It actually takes longer to absorb into the bloodstream and disappear than oxytocin. So that's why positive has to be at a rate higher than the negative in order to maintain bonded and connected relationships. They've done some work study stuff. A couple ladies did some, university from Brazil and a university of New York did some stuff. And they said teams that have positive ratios of 3-to-1 are higher performing. And they also, Gottman talks about this in some of his research. He says, once you get to 11, or it's for relationships, close relationships, it's 13-to-1. Once you get 13 positive to 1 kind of difficult interaction, the stickiness of the relationship falls apart. So it's not all about being, joy, joy, happy, happy, joy, joy 100% of the time. People are wired to have some difficulty and trial in their life. It's the ratios in the process, holy crap, that you have to pay attention to with teams and people. So this led me on a whole longer discovery about like what's going on with the brain. And I've kind of come to some conclusions from some of Daniel Siegel's work, Mindsight, and then some additional stuff by Dweck and adult learning theory. But we're going to do a little, you guys follow along with me. It'll be a bonding moment. Supposedly, if we all do the same thing at the same time, it'll be kind of like bonding. We're going to talk through the brain and the 3 major parts of the brain. And they have impact on the way we look at people and the way we look at teams and groups. And hopefully we can figure that out as we go along. So if you take your hand and stick it out, it makes a really great model of the brain. We're only talking about one side of the brain now. So stick your hand out. And then this part right here where your thumb is, this is kind of the back of your head like that, right? So if you go like this, that's your brain. You're staring at the back of it. But your thumb here and this part, this is your brain stem. It's called reptilian brain. And in it, it regulates hunger, breathing, sex. Not love, sex. They're different. I'm not going to go real deep into that. We don't have time. But so on top of that brainstem, you've got what they call the paleomammalian brain. And it's a bunch of little nodes that are kind of set on top here that regulate bonding and connection and emotion, okay? That's where you see those. So that's the second part of the brain. And then the third part kind of wraps across the top. This is the prefrontal cortex. They also call it executive functions. And what it does is that's where your planning and reflection take place. When you do memory cueing and you're doing recall, the prefrontal cortex reaches into the other parts of your brain and pulls it up. This is where humans have the ability to visualize the future and reflect on the past, right? This is the part of your brain that can change the rest of your brain, right? Because you can think about your thinking and rewire it. So those 3 portions of the brain are really important. When you talk to a human or you talk to a group of humans, a lot of times we like to believe that we're talking to the prefrontal cortex, okay? And sometimes we are. But if the other brain's basic needs aren't met, it's not very likely you'll get the full attention of the third brain, okay? And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that and try and illustrate what that means. So you wrap that across, you got your two, right? And then that's your brain. So the idea here being, and we'll talk about it in connection with these. So when the brainstem works in overdrive is when people feel like they're threatened. So this is when you lose your temper, right? This is when you flip your lid. Now, when you lose your temper, somebody comes to you and says something you don't like, and it's an automatic response. This part, the brainstem takes over, right? That's where the cortisol gets injected. So when you're in a flight or fight response, you're not thinking, right? You're not like, oh, I wonder why they're yelling at me. You're like, I hate that guy. I want to punch him in the face. Or something like that. Probably much milder than my base emotions. So the idea being, if as a leader, you're not creating a safe place to fail and take risk, then that brain's going to take over, and the prefrontal cortex doesn't really care because it's not in the picture at that point, right? You can also layer in things like, okay, let's say you're working on lean and you want to bring in KPIs, key performance indicators, and dashboards and put them all over the board. If you're in a culture that works to motivate people by risk, yeah, yell, scream, threat, push people into places they don't want to be, KPIs on the wall, what are they going to look like? Do they look like indicators of success that they're going to be proud of? What do they look like? Does anybody know? They look like failure? Yeah? They look like axes and knives, too, right? Those numbers are going to be used to slaughter me if they're red, okay? So if your organization's here and you put KPIs up, lean tools suddenly become weapons of destruction. Okay? So first responsibility of leadership, and even within your group, if you can create a safe place to fail and take risks, that's good. It's hard to jump to shared purpose and vision unless you've got a connected and bonded group. So the second responsibility of leadership is to say, what are the behaviors in my group that's keeping people from bonding and connecting? How do I get Susan, who hates Francine's guts, to see each other as people rather than objects? And the Arbinger guy is going to talk about this, I hope. Yeah? And stay tuned for that one. That'll be great. So the second piece is connected bonded groups. Once you have these connected bonded groups, people act out less, right? And you can really leverage shared purpose and vision. You can really tie people's individual stories to the collective story and group. Okay? So this is the one we like to skip and spend the least time on, connected bonded groups. Team building activities, how are you, really trying to understand the individual, because we're busy trying to get an objective done. It pays dividends if you'll spend time with it. Okay, so hopefully we have some idea of the brain and how to create engaged, like the things to look for, right, on engaged and connected groups. So this is how do we speed up that? You guys have seen this PDCA stuff? So have you ever heard the back and forth over PDCA and PDSA? Deming never adopted PDCA, from what I understand. MI basically said he continued to stick to PDSA and call it the Short learning cycle. I'm not sure, but I think he maybe didn't like the check thing. He's like, you got to study and reflect. So if you look at early, I think it's John Dewey, he said, we do not learn by experience, rather we learn by reflecting on experience. I think Drucker said something like, follow effective action with quiet reflection. From quiet reflection comes more effective action. Okay? So I'm going to argue that if you'll make more time for study and reflection, you can speed your learning rates within your organization as you do your PDCA cycles. And why is that important, or how does that connect? We have this stat that says when we look at organizations that excel at recognition, they have a 40% more engaged workforce. So that's a good number. What does that mean? It means people who actually have recognition programs and are regularly doing them, you're seeing their engagement improve. And then this was a cool one. At one of our booths, the O.C. Tanner Institute set up, and they just had people come to a computer and write in what causes great work. It was like free-filled. Then they put it all together. So 37% of people said recognize my achievements. You have these other big categories. Nothing, I'm self-motivated. We gave up on that. Trust me, inspire me, pay me more, other, train me, promote me, I don't know. So if we look at memory recall and retrieval, right, remembering, they basically say there's two types. There's retrieval, which you sit there and you think about what happened, and you're kind of retrieving memories and doing a sequence thing. And that takes a little while. Recognition is much faster. Your brain recognizes something and associates it with something else. So to turn recall into recognition, you attach value to it, right? You associate something of value or something similar in life. So when people say recognize my achievements, they're saying give me value for my achievements. Reflect on who I am as a person and recognize the value that I bring. This is an intentional process that you have to sow in. Hansei, reflection, this is a critical part. So let's see, where are we going? Here's a few routines that I think can really help. One of the routines is this monthly one-to-one. So when I worked at JBS, I had 50 people. I knew about the families of maybe one person there. This is work. I didn't have monthly one-to-ones. I did performance reviews. I was focused on the job. At O.C. Tanner, part of what your job is to know who your people are, what they like, where they're from, how many kids they have, what's interesting. Your job is to learn their personal story. And then once you know their personal story, you now have the ability to weave and connect it with the organization and your objectives, or help them find and maximize their own potential. Okay? It's much less directive. And this is the purpose of the monthly one-to-ones at O.C. Tanner is the minimum, the absolute minimum. But this is a routine that helps to dig into regularly. Okay? The other thing I wanted to talk about is, so this is a service award presentation. I'm going to play a little video clip real quick. But in terms of, well, I was talking to Gary Peterson one day, and he said, we just had this meeting, and he's talking to me, and he says, you know, when we have these meetings, and we call these big meetings, people come to them, and you can see there's a little fear in the back of their mind. They're not sure what's going to happen and what's going to be announced. And they're not as primed and receptive. He says, when people come to a service award celebrating somebody's career, they all come happy. They come happy, ready to listen. They've already started a reflection process where they're contemplating the great things that this person's done. What could I say about this person that they've done, right? So they're coming like primed for indoctrination. It's kind of cool. And they all gather around, and people get up and tell stories about the person who's being recognized. And I'm running short on time, but I'm just going to play a little bit of this. So this is Richard Noyce. He's a manager. This is Deb Shirtliff. This is her 40 year. And you'll see the different leaders that are there. And then I just wanted to give you a feel for what happens.
All right, well, welcome everybody. I am honored to be able to kind of speak in behalf of Deb Shirtliff today on her 40th
That's our
anniversary.
CEO, Dave Peterson. And Gary Peterson. And his family's right here on the front row. So you
Very
invite your
awesome
family.
occasion. It's not a lot of people who ever get to receive a 40-year service award for their company. I was looking that up today, and it said the government stops counting after 39, so they don't even keep statistics after that. So pretty cool.
So Richard talks, a few other leaders talk. This is one of her coworkers talking about all the great stuff she's done.
When I took a minute to think about how she impacts the people around her, one word keeps coming to mind: connections. This lady knows everyone, and everyone knows her. She enjoys friendships with people she worked with decades ago and the newest employees still in training. She is immediately welcoming and interested.
Okay, so I'm not going to, it's like 20 minutes long. So OC Tanner takes the time to do these service awards, and different team members come up and tell their stories, and then different leaders tell their stories about the things they remember. Gary talked, her previous VPs talked. You see everyone honoring this person, and they're talking about those values and those principles and connecting them to actions. So you're essentially training the entire group as to what's important for the organization. If your values switch, you've got an automatic way to help indoctrinate a whole new set of values, right? Values are like, I've never seen someone that has horrible values, but I've seen a lot of people who never visit them. This happens continually at OC Tanner. I think it gives them the ability to shape and mold culture in a way that other organizations don't. So to end, I just want to talk about stories. Does anyone recognize this picture or what this is a story of? It's George Washington chopping down a tree, right? Did this have an impact on the American psyche? Yeah? Is it true? It's not true. This guy? What's he responsible for? Forest fires, yeah? These guys, so cute. This is the most recent one. They probably did more for the awareness of global warming and shifting the way people take action than any other single piece of legislation or effort. Okay? And if you go back and you study politicians and you study the history and the storytellers of society, we get a drastically different picture. We do not shape culture by success. Rather, we shape culture by the stories we tell about success. Okay? The media understands this, but do we as leaders understand it and take our responsibility seriously? Okay? The stories we tell at the lunch table, the things we choose to reflect on and talk about, change and reshape our culture. It's easy to see problems and find problems. It's a little bit harder to reflect and find the good and pull it out of people. Okay? If I have a leader that can find the good in people, I know they'll be able to spot problems. But if I have a person that only sees negative, they will be toxic for our culture. That's kind of what I wanted to leave you with. I went a little long, I think. Am I good? We got 2 minutes for Q&A, so thanks.